Get Rich Education is brought to you by Valhalla Wealth and Ridge Lending Group.
You're listening to the show that has created more passive income for people than nearly any show in the world. This is the powerful Get Rich Education.
Hey, welcome to GRE. This is Get Rich Education, episode 171. I'm your host, and my name is Keith Weinhold. And today, talking about how you attract and retain great tenants for your income properties, some of which is just sort of common sense. Then after that, we're going to discuss a topic that's definitely not common sense, which is where real estate investing intersects with the economy that you live in every day. This is really fundamental stuff. Your tenant is your customer. You've got to be able to supply a product that they demand and then keep them there in your unit. As any real estate investor knows, your number one cash flow killer is vacancy and turnover. So let's dig right into the very heart of how you reduce that right here. So the success or failure of your real estate investments, it really depends on your ability to consistently attract and then retain great tenants. Because in the end, it just doesn't matter how great of a deal you think you got on a property or how strong your projected cash flow and return on investment are. Because without great tenants that pay rent on time and take care of your property, well, then the cash flow and the returns all just sort of evaporate into thin air. Great tenants, by definition, they have a job, they're relatively clean, they pay rent on time, and they're law-abiding. And yes, I do mean that they have a job. Here at GRE, we talk about don't follow money, make money follow you. Yeah, but see, your tenant, they don't think that way. By and large, they move to where the job is. Your tenant makes a central part of their life following money around rather than following their heart or following their passion or chasing their dream. They follow a job. As I've often said, you want to think about how your tenant is thinking. Your tenant is just not as aspirational as you, the GRE listener, is, and that's okay. I'm glad that they're out there for us and that there's a steady supply of soul sellers. Yes, people selling their soul. So the question that naturally follows then really for you is, so how do you find great tenants for your investment property? Because really the answer is simple, yet it's impactful. And that is this, it's that the quality of the asset that you buy determines the quality of the tenant that you are likely to attract. You cannot change a property's location once you buy. Now, you've got to understand that you don't actually want some amazing A-class location. Those high-end properties, they are not profitable for long-term rentals anyway, okay? So you're not looking for a single-family rental home with great sweeping panoramic views of a pristine, sparkling lake that's stocked with rainbow trout, or a home with a 3-car heated garage with a painted floor, okay? That's A-class stuff, the very best properties. I'd also advise staying away from the bottom, from D-class properties, the worst, the old collecting the rent at knife point kind of stuff. That's not where you want to be either. If you want to find excellent tenants for your investment grade property, you should first purchase an investment property with the qualities that attract excellent tenants. So really then, a great question to ponder if you want to find good tenants then is, what do good tenants look for in a rental property? That's really a central question as we dig into the heart of this. And I've got 6 points here as far as what good tenants look for in a rental property. Number one of those 6 is safety. Safety is our most basic human need, and that is a powerful motivator toward attracting excellent tenants. One of the main reasons why your prospective tenant decided to spend more to lease a home, maybe as opposed to an apartment, is to provide a safe environment for themselves and their family. Purchase properties in safe neighborhoods, again, avoiding D-class areas. Good turnkey providers know this, and they practice this. They have a company reputation to protect. Turnkey providers, they want referrals from satisfied investors, and they want repeat business from those satisfied investors. The second thing out of 6 is that you want a place that's in move-in ready condition for that tenant. That condition of that property, and more specifically, that ability to move right in right away, that's very important to excellent tenants. Now, you could try to rent out a property that's not quite move-in ready, like something that would still require paint or flooring or cleaning, but I assure you that you're not going to be able to attract an excellent tenant that way. So your target tenant, they plan to take care of your property, so they're going to have high standards of cleanliness and maintenance. If you provide them with a move-in ready home, you are communicating to them that you share those same standards, and they're more likely to leave it in that condition too. You know what? The first property manager that I ever hired, I only employed them for a total of a year or a year and a half before I had to get rid of them. That's because whenever I had a vacancy, they just did not get the property fresh and clean for the next tenant. So what I mean is, like, the unit still had nicks in the walls and faded paint and half busted window blinds, and the manager considered that ready and showable. They showed that to prospective new tenants. Well, what a waste. I wouldn't even want to accept the type of tenant that would accept living in those conditions themselves, because that type of tenant probably would not respect the unit either. So what you can ask your new property manager to do as you're getting in the flow of things between your first few tenancies is have them send you a 30 to 60 second walkthrough video to verify that it's acceptable to you for showing to the next tenant. Because if it's acceptable to you, then it's probably going to be acceptable to a quality tenant. And this is just a good way for you to get an update on how your property is looking across the country there anyway. And any good manager is going to do that for you. The third thing out of 6 is you want proximity to employment. Let's face it, very few people like to commute. So proximity to employment centers is very important to good tenants. You can have a great move-in ready home zoned to great schools, but it won't matter if your tenant has to drive an hour to work each day. As you look at potential properties, think about where your target tenants are likely to work and how close the property is to that area. And we're talking about proximity to things that everyone needs. That's the stuff that's going to sort of get weighted higher, like proximity to a good grocery store helps, or a Walgreens or some other drugstore. That's helpful too. We're talking about the fundamentals of what your tenant wants today. That's your customer. The last time Rich Dad Advisor Ken McElroy was here, we discussed what the newer amenities are that tenants want today that they weren't so much asking for 10 to 15 years ago, like good Wi-Fi. But today, we're talking about more fundamental and enduring things that your tenant wants. And the fourth of those 6 things is they want some upgrades if you're going to get that good tenant. Some inexperienced investors subscribe to this myth that your investment property needs to be good enough for you to want to live in it yourself. Well, I'm telling you, depending upon your standards, that is probably flawed. You are really limiting yourself if you think that way, that you would have to be able to live in it yourself. I'm telling you, every rental property that I own, and I can't even think of one exception to this right now, if I lived there, well, I'd still feel safe, but it would be a substantial downgrade to my quality of life. Now, on the other side, you might think that your unit just needs to be barely good enough for a rental. Therefore, if you purchase a low-end starter home with cheap finishes and maybe vinyl flooring that's thin and peeling at the edges, and then you rent them to marginal tenants, you're going to go ahead and get limited results. I mean, that right there can almost work in some markets, but it's likely going to hurt you, especially if things are in any state of disrepair. It's going to hurt you with tenant retention, because when that tenant starts doing just a little bit better financially, they're going to move out. So don't do that. Instead, purchase homes that have strategic upgrades that move the needle with the better caliber of tenants that you want. We're talking about vinyl plank flooring, even granite countertop in some of these markets, black or stainless appliances, probably not so much the white ones, maybe even a covered patio, things like that. You know how I talk about how it's not about what you want in a unit, it's about what your tenant wants. And it's really about putting your desires aside. Sometimes you have to put your tenant's desires before yours. I've got an example for this, and I know that I'm different here. You're probably not going to agree with me on this, but I've never understood people's desire for hardwood laminate flooring or vinyl plank flooring. Okay, to me personally, carpeting is just so much more comfortable And then on top of that, when people move into a place that has this laminate flooring that they desire, what's the first thing they do? They go ahead and cover it up with some big area rug, and they put that on top of the laminate or vinyl. So I just don't get it. And then the area rug, that doesn't have any padding underneath it, so it isn't nice and soft if the whole thing were just carpeted instead. And some people say that laminate flooring is easier to clean. Well, not really. Not when you've put a big area rug in the middle of it, and now you've got that rug to clean, plus you need to use the Swiffer dry on the perimeter out there where the fake wood is. So it just doesn't make sense to me. Plus, in cold climates, the laminate feels cold on your feet. So I've just never understood Americans' desire for these cold, hard surfaces. But see, that right there, this is where I have to put aside what I would want. Most people, tenants included, they want these cold, hard surfaces for whatever reason. I just don't get it, but I don't have to, because I need to understand and you need to understand what the customer wants and go ahead and give it to them. So I'm happy to give them their cold, hard, luxury vinyl plank because that's more efficient for investors in the long run. That stuff rarely has to be replaced. So we're talking about how to find and retain great tenants here today. The fifth way out of 6 is neighborhood quality. Now, neighborhood quality, that's kind of different from safety that I was discussing earlier. Neighborhood quality determines the quality of your tenant's life. Think about the community that you live in right now, okay? Those neighborhood amenities, they probably played a major part in your decision to live there. Your lifestyle is different in a neighborhood with running and bike trails and community pools and tennis courts and a nearby gym, right? Well, quality tenants care about neighborhood quality. A community definitely does not have to have all of those amenities, but if it's got a few, that's better. Part of that is access to transportation and basics, okay? These are just sort of basic necessities like restaurants and shopping. That's something that's very important because it affects other important factors like commute to work and lifestyle quality. So when you're looking at investment properties, think about how easy is it to get to the main highway or park or get to public transportation? Are there basic services that are somewhat easily within reach? And then really the last of these 6 things, how to attract great tenants, that's rent and price. Your investment is ultimately a business decision for you and your prospective tenant. Your tenant's going to be concerned with the rent amount, and you're going to be concerned with the relationship between the rent and the price you pay for the property. You need to make sure that the projected rent isn't so high that it limits your tenant pool, and yet it shouldn't be so low that it lowers the quality of the tenant that you attract. So good tenants pay that rent on time. That's a baseline. And then great tenants go well beyond on-time payments. They're going to treat the property with respect. They're going to see it as a home versus a rental. And they're going to treat you, the owner and the provider of that home, with respect as well. So there, I've discussed 6 items that attract excellent tenants to your property. So now that we talked about attracting tenants, what about retaining those tenants? You know what? If your tenant, if they want to paint the inside of their property, if they want to paint the walls, I say let them go do it. It's going to make it like home to them. And when it makes it like home to them, you're going to be a lot more likely to retain them. Like, for example, how motivated would a tenant be to go ahead and paint the walls of their place if they plan to move out in 6 months? They're probably not. And they're also more likely to pay a rent increase when they've invested their time and their resources into painting a place and making it feel like their own. So conversely, now what if they asked to paint the place and you told them no? Well, then how long do you think that they'll feel like staying? And you know what? It can be written into the lease that they have to paint the place back or whatever. So let them paint it. Let them make it feel like it's theirs, and they'll probably take better care of other parts of your property too. Another great way for you to retain excellent tenants is that you should ask for tenant referrals. And you might do this through your property manager. It's the whole birds of the same feather flock together. You are the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. If you ask your excellent tenant who their friends are and you offer them a $100 gift card or even a $200 gift card, and that is so worth it for another excellent tenant. Something else that helps with retention, and this is where the power of hiring out professional management really helps you, is that your manager should respond to maintenance requests promptly, because a good tenant, they're just going to get sick of dealing with that leaky faucet or with that pilot light that keeps going out in the water heater. If you're a full-time job worker yourself, well, it's a lot easier for you to defer or just kind of put off handling that maintenance request if you're trying to do the self-management thing. Again, think about how you would want to be treated. Think about how your tenant's thinking. If their bathroom door hasn't closed properly for 3 weeks after they first told you about it, number one, they're not going to be happy. And number two, they're surely not going to refer their friends either. When it comes to maintenance requests, a 24-hour live answering service for your tenants, that's something that's going to make them feel better, even if your manager does not get to it right away. So ultimately, bottom line, what you really want are happy tenants. When you have happy tenants, you're probably meeting that ideal that we talk about here, where you're providing housing that's, you've heard me say it so many times, clean, safe, affordable, and functional. Well, I'm coming right back with more. We're going to talk about perhaps the most stealth way that real estate investing makes you wealthy. It's something that definitely does not qualify as common sense at all. And first, and I didn't know whether I wanted to mention this earlier or not, but while I'm talking to you, my heart is rather heavy today because my grandma Weinhold, my father's mother, just passed away. And I actually tried to do the show here earlier and I wasn't quite ready. But you know, I found some more strength here when I realized that Grandma would have wanted me to do it. You know that I've sort of affectionately referred to my Grandma Weinhold as Grandma Yellen on the show before for her loose physical resemblance to Federal Reserve Chairwoman Janet Yellen. So I just thought that you deserved to know. She was also my last surviving grandparent. So from my perspective, I have lost an entire generation of my family today. You know, in the best light, when something like this happens, I like to think, don't be sorry that it's over, be glad that it happened. And that's especially true when she was 95 years old, just weeks from 96. She still lived in her own home by herself. And just 2 days ago, I talked to her on the phone as she was in her Lancaster County, Pennsylvania home. And you know, I could talk to her just like I'm talking to you right now. I never had to slow down my talking or raise my voice. So she had a great mind right up until the very end. So always incredibly loving and welcoming to others. She still hosted the entire extended family at her Five Pointville, Pennsylvania house this past Christmas. And well, it was her last Christmas. I'll be right back. I will always love you and your spirit, Grandma Weinhold.
Since 2014, the powerful Get Rich Education podcast has created more passive income for people than nearly any other show in the world. This show teaches you how to earn strong returns from passive real estate investing in the best markets without losing your time being a flipper or landlord. Show host Keith Weinhold writes for both Forbes and Rich Dad Advisors and delivers a new show every week. Since 2014, there's been millions of listener downloads in 188 world nations. He has A-list show guests include top-selling personal finance author Robert Kiyosaki. Get Rich Education can be heard on every podcast platform, plus it has its own dedicated Apple and Android listener phone apps. Build wealth on the go with the Get Rich Education podcast. Sign up now for the Get Rich Education podcast or visit GetRichEducation.com.
MC Laubscher is the host of the top-rated business and investing podcast, Cash Flow Ninja, and also the president and chief wealth strategist of Valhalla Wealth. They help busy people build wealth outside of Wall Street by strategically combining their clients' cash flow statements with the financial vehicle of the wealthy, according to the infinite banking concept. If you are interested to learn how to perpetually multiply your wealth, you can access an exclusive webinar at yourownbankingsystem.com.
This is the Real Wealth Network's Kathy Fetke, and you are listening to the always valuable Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold.
I'm Keith Weinhold. You're listening to Get Rich Education. Before you purchase that clean, safe, affordable, functional property, you're going to be miles further ahead if you have a mortgage lender that specializes specifically in income property loans. In fact, ideally, you're going to start there before you select a property. A company that knows what a non-owner occupant investor needs, they can get you closed faster, and a lot of times they can help ensure that you even get closed at all. and the company that's helped more real estate investors realize their dreams of financial freedom than any other mortgage lender in the entire nation. They can help you too, and that's Ridge Lending Group. They're based in Portland, Oregon, but that hardly matters because they specifically focus on originating income property loans, and they do it in just about every U.S. state. You can check them out at ridgelendinggroup.com. In fact, Ridge Lending Group CEO Chaley Ridge has generously been here on the show with us 3 times to give you the inside scoop on how you can best position yourself financially and about all the changing lending guidelines. She was most recently here with us on episode number 154. So when you get a hold of them at ridgelendinggroup.com, tell them thank you for coming on to GRE and helping you with your strategy. You know, with what I've discussed on how to attract and retain great tenants in your property, I think that a lot of that is common sense, but yet they're the type of things you might tend to forget about if you're just not reminded every once in a while. But something that's not so common sense-ish is how you can profit from inflation. And my first ever article that I wrote recently for Forbes magazine covered that exact topic. So I'm not just going to blanketly read the article to you here. I'm also going to inject some more commentary into it for you. But this is kind of stealth stuff that most people aren't thinking about. So here we go. As a 15-year real estate investor, author, Rich Dad Advisors writer, and longtime real estate investing podcast host, hey, here we are, I found that homeowners, investors alike, they still champion this largely antiquated ideal of a paid-off property. Well, inflation, that's really just one of many reasons to consider maintaining a mortgage. And by the way, leverage and tax benefits are some other big reasons for holding a mortgage. Leverage is probably the biggest one, in fact, but we're talking about inflation's importance specifically in why you should consider keeping your loan balance high here. Well, let's just define inflation. Basically, I think the definition of inflation has kind of changed over time. Inflation used to mean an increase in the money supply. And today, inflation, it really means the rate at which price levels rise. It results in the diminished purchasing power of your dollar. Your dollar just keeps getting watered down over time. That's why your $8 Chipotle burrito is soon going to cost $9. It's why in 1913, a pack of Wrigley's chewing gum cost you 4 cents, and that pack will cost you $1 today. And you just don't think about inflation as much as you should. And do you know why you don't think about inflation as much as you should? I think this is something I've mentioned before, but it's because you've never seen an inflation bill. You've never seen like a tangible inflation bill. You don't get an inflation bill alongside your electric bill and your internet bill and your credit card bill and your Netflix bill. So inflation is insidious. It's like an invisible tax. It's like a stealthy thief. Your inevitable dollar debasement, see, that's precisely why you wouldn't keep $1 million in the bank for 3 decades, because in 30 years, a 4% inflation rate, that would whittle your $1 million down to just $308,000 of purchasing power. That would be a bad idea. So all the way back from ancient Romans crudely clipping the edge of their denarius coins, all the way up here to the U.S. Federal Reserve's quantitative easing in the 2000s, governments and central banks feed their inflationary mandate. They want inflation, which is a completely separate conversation. Well, now, how exactly does inflation benefit those that hold on to mortgages? Well, just like you wouldn't keep $1 million in the bank, look, in 30 years, a 4% inflation rate would whittle your $1 million mortgage loan balance down to just $308,000 of inflation-adjusted debt burden. Yes, so just like inflation harms the saver, it benefits the borrower. Real estate investors, we have the ability to borrow with long-term fixed interest rate mortgages tethered to an income property, and we can do it at scale. And when we borrow this way, now your monthly principal and interest payments are completely outsourced to tenants. So why rush to pay down your loan when both tenants and inflation are eroding your debt for you simultaneously? So when you're the beneficiary of this situation, you have to ask why you would ever make extra mortgage principal payments. Because when you do, here's what you're saying. You're going, hey, Mr. Banker, here's an extra $100. Don't pay me any interest on it. If I need it back, I'll pay you fees once again. Oh, plus I'll also prove to you that I qualify again. So that doesn't make any sense. And that's kind of along the lines of my whole financially free beats debt free mantra right there. So rather than using an extra $100 to pay down your mortgage, what if you used it toward investing in more real estate? Okay, because if you believe that real estate creates wealth, well, then you want to control more property, not less. Again, you cannot shrink your way to wealth. So if you take out a $1 million loan, you just have a total of $1 million of mortgage balances across your investment portfolio. Well, say over a couple years, you have a total of 10% inflation. Well, you're only going to have to pay it back in nominal terms, in name-only terms. Your lender is not requiring you to repay it in inflation-adjusted dollars. So with that 10% inflation, it becomes just $900,000 that you need to pay back in real terms. As time passes in inflating currency supply, that's going to mean that wages escalate, that consumer prices climb higher, and that your properties are going to command higher rents. And this is why it becomes ever easier for you to pay back your debt. Inflation profiting, this is your quietest wealth center. I think it's the quietest of all five. It is truly your friendly phantom. If you have, for example, say a $1,300 fixed rate amortizing mortgage payment each month on a property that you lease to others, well, that $1,300, your P&I, that's not going to rise with inflation either, but your rental income will. And this right here, this is why generally your cash flow grows faster than inflation over time. That's because your biggest expense, your loan repayment amount, is typically fixed. Now, if you had no loan, that means you'd have no inflation profiting benefits. Inflation transfers wealth from lenders to borrowers because lenders are paid back with diluted dollars, and real estate investors, we are just optimally positioned to take advantage of this. And remember, too, if inflation transfers wealth from lenders to borrowers, think about how many mortgage notes you really want to hold on to. I know we've got some mortgage note investors out there. I'm not saying you should never get them, but see, I want to mostly be on the debt side instead, because when I'm a debtor, now I've got inflation helping me, not working against me like it does for mortgage note holders when that person is making a loan to others. Again, inflation transfers wealth from lenders to borrowers. What did Robert Kiyosaki say about debt the last time that he was here on the show with us? So, Robert, you talked about real estate deals and that you're still an active real estate investor. When you're looking at a real estate deal, what are some of the key things that you consider before you make a purchase? What do you try to keep in mind before buying?
How much debt can I get?
Yeah, so this is Robert Kiyosaki, the author of the book Rich Dad Poor Dad and the greatest personal finance author of all time. When asked about real estate, debt was the very first thing that he brought up. And by the way, he was last with us here in episode 126, if you haven't heard that. So the rise of globalization and technology, that might actually slow inflation's creep, but I do not think it can reverse it anytime soon. So just remember, to create wealth, you need to both think and act differently than the crowd. Importantly, each debt origination that you make, that is smartly anchored to an income-producing asset, a property that's worth more than the amount of your debt. And if your asset value temporarily drops, like a lot of us experienced in 2007 to 2010, I did, or are you really going to be concerned if that asset still produces income for you? So risk still exists. You've got to carefully select your cash flowing asset in a metro area that projects job and population growth so that you have a reasonable expectation that the property is going to stay occupied with a rent-paying tenant. So with all this, then why does debt get such a bad name? And I think that's because debt triggers negative feelings, because your very first experience with debt, that was likely when it was tied to something that did not produce income for you. So you worked overtime on the weekend in order to make your Honda Civic payment. You made sacrifices to pay credit card finance charges on a Morton's Steakhouse dinner that you splurged on 6 months earlier. So you paid for your Honda Civic. Your Honda Civic never paid you. But if you use smart debt tied to an income-producing single-family home or a fourplex or an eightplex, now you're on top of debt. You're not trapped beneath it. So what is your bottom line as far as how you profit from inflation? You borrow massively. That's how you profit from inflation. If you've got substantial equity accumulated in just a few properties, you can make equity transfers with cash out refinances and 1031 tax deferred exchanges. So what that does for you is it creates smaller equity positions in more properties. Okay, so the first thing that would mean is that you're going to have more smart debt. And then secondly, realize that you didn't lose any equity. You've just transferred it in order to create greater leverage, more properties, and more debt. So thirdly, what you can do is you can better diversify into different geographies this way, and that hedges your market risk. Fourthly, with greater projected cash flows, what you've done is you've taken steps away from being debt-free and toward financial freedom. So finally, you are quietly profiting more from inflation. So no matter what, your currency is going to keep losing value, but rather than this causing frustration, see, now you know how to make inflation profitable. So I'm an inflation cheerleader, actually. You know, some people have so much bad debt that they can't sleep. If I didn't have enough smart debt, I couldn't sleep. I'd probably have to go work somewhere. So this is why I'm interested in debt. Just think, for every $1 million in real estate debt that you have, if inflation is, say, 4%, and it's easy to believe that the real rate of inflation could be higher than 4%, and it's certainly higher than what the government reports. That's just sort of a separate conversation. But at just a 4% inflation rate, your $1 million of debt that's outsourced to tenants, that means you're being enriched an extra $40,000 every year. $40,000 for you every year. And this is a way that real estate makes you wealthy that most people just never even consider. And you know what? How many people hold on to $1 million of debt for as little as 1 year? Well, almost nobody. So over just 5 years, that's an extra $200,000 transferred to you. And actually, with compounding, it's going to be more than that, maybe $220,000 over 5 years. I don't have a calculator here. Again, and this is profiting on something that most people don't even notice or know about. So it's no wonder why real estate investing has made more ordinary people wealthy than anything else. And gosh, if you're newer to studying the economy, just read more on Investopedia on what economists think the true rate of inflation is. Okay, so we've just been talking about a 4% inflation on your $1 million of cash flowing real estate debt here. Now, what if you've got, say, 6% inflation? Again, that is a totally realistic number. Say 6% true diminished purchasing power of the dollar, and you've got $2 million worth of debt. Well, that right there, that is a $120,000 gain that you're receiving each year. You're holding properties more than a year as well. So over just 5 years, that's a $600,000 gain for you. And maybe that's $630,000 or something like that with compounding. And again, this is something going on in the background that most people don't even consider with all the other ways that real estate is paying you. So just astounding. You know, maybe that's why over a number of years, some real estate investors don't even understand how they got so far ahead of the stock investors. So it really is remarkable. And I've linked that Forbes article for you in the show notes in case you care to read that, just to help reinforce what you've listened to. I also discuss the inflation hedging benefit that I just described and the 4 other ways that real estate investing pays you. Yes, you're paid 5 ways simultaneously, as longtime listeners know. I discuss all this in my quick read 80-page book, and I'm just giving away the e-version of that book, 7 Money Myths That Are Killing Your Wealth Potential. That book is completely free. I'm not sure how much longer I'm going to be able to do that. And I don't just give away a teaser chapter or 2, but I'm giving away the entire book free at GetRichEducation.com. That ought to give you plenty to think about until next week. I am enthusiastically dedicated to helping you build durable wealth for yourself. That's why I will be back for you next week. Until then, don't quit your daydream.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
Ranked by Forbes as one of the fastest growing cities, Orlando, Florida has a big and diverse economy, yet still features affordable rental properties that cash flow. Our boots on the ground turnkey provider, Greg Bond, wrote a special report to help you discover the amazing market of Orlando. Request your free copy today. Visit GetRichEducation.com/Orlando. That's GetRichEducation.com/Orlando.
The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, GetRichEducation.com.